Hey now, and welcome to a quick episode of the Booker Corrigan Show, and it is an absolute thrill to have former Princeton national champion, Team USA national champion, Jesse Hubbard on the line. Jesse, thanks for taking some time and joining us. How are things going?
Things are great. Thanks for having me on, Booker.
Jesse, you're one of a small group of people on the planet that have won 3 straight national championships in your Princeton days. Then you won a world championship with Team USA. Are there any memories, as you look back, are there any memories that stand out as an all-time great moment?
Yeah, I would think that winning our first national championship in 1996 was probably the best moment of my lacrosse career, just because I grew up going to the Final Four and the championships in the late 80s and early 90s and watching all my heroes play on that stage. So to get the opportunity to play for a national championship and then pull one off, that was definitely a great feeling. And then immediately after that, the pressure, I was a sophomore, the pressure to repeat was big. And Coach Tierney at the time, he obviously won national championships in 1992 and 1994 before I got to school. So 1996, my first was his third, and he had no intention of stopping. So the pressure to not only get back to the finals, but to win in 97 was huge. And then the pressure to win a third my senior year, because you never want to go out as a senior on a down note. So the pressure that we were under in the 97, 98 season it was pretty severe. So, but the 96 was, that was a special moment.
It's always fun to backtrack. And let's take you all the way back to your days at St. Albans with Coach Nostrand. At what point in your life did lacrosse really click for Jesse Hubbard?
Yeah, it's funny. Washington, D.C., that area back, not a big lacrosse hotbed by any means. There was some of the private schools, any youth recreational leagues or anything like that. So my brother and I got sticks for Christmas. I think I was about 9, he was 11, and we just kind of played around with the sticks and a ball, and some kids in the neighborhood played. But we didn't have any idea what the sport was like. We just thought that these things were cool and they were fun. And my first exposure to high-level lacrosse, we went out to a Maryland Penn game at Byrd Stadium. I think it was 1988. Our father took us out there to get some exposure to the
good Penn team.
Very good Penn team. And watching that level lacrosse was eye-opening. We were like, oh, that's what the sport is. And then we ended up going to Maryland lacrosse camp, Dick Adele's lacrosse camp in the summer. And that exposed us to the actual game and the strategy and the skills. And I felt like I was the worst kid there.
Yeah.
I didn't have to stick work.
Welcome.
And that drove me to practice in the off season as much as I could. But probably the defining moment that really made me want to pursue lacrosse and getting back to that Final Four, which made me dream of playing in a Final Four, was that epic 1989 Final Four.
Oh, right.
And then the 89 Syracuse Hopkins finals with Petramala, Gate, and those guys. I mean, I think anyone who saw that game, or especially was at that game, you just felt the electricity. And I get chills when I see highlights of that game. I recorded it and probably watched it 100 times that summer.
It's funny because we all used to use the VHS tapes and get that game on VHS. And one of the things, I've had a conversation with a lot of lacrosse people lately, and we say, what's the best national championship game to ever take place? But you can't vote for 89 because everybody knows that that's the best. There are a ton of great ones, and I'm guessing you might be a little partial to 96, 97, 98. But Jesse, at what point in your time with Massey and Hess did it hit you that we got something special here? The three of us can work together. When did you guys know, like, wow, we're gonna be remembered?
Well, I mean, it didn't really hit us till probably late our freshman year that that we were going to be relied upon to carry the team. We had a pretty good freshman. I mean, in 1994, the year before we got there, Princeton won the championship.
Yep.
And they had Scott Bacigalupo, Scott Reinhardt, Kevin Lowe. They had senior leadership. And so we came in, and Scott Conklin was a senior attackman, but the offense was really had graduated for the most part, and we returned our starting defense. So in 1995, it was it was defensively led, and I was actually running some midfield, and John Hess was pretty much the starter from day one, and Chris Massey was getting worked in there with Todd Eichelberger at attack, and we were kind of looking around for senior leadership, veteran leadership on offense, and I don't think we were maybe as aggressive as we should have been as freshmen, just because we were trying to be we were trying to fit into the system, and then we lost up at Cornell late in the season. That was actually our only Ivy League loss in 4 years, and
wow.
And after that game, Coach T kind of pulled John, Chris, and me aside and said, stop playing like freshmen. He's like, this is your team now. And it was before we played Delaware. And he basically put the team, I mean, we were still freshmen, but he put it in our hands. And I think our teammates realized that we needed to step up and start asserting some control and leadership. But I don't think we realized it, because we're very humble players. We want to fit in. We don't want to look like we're trying to do too much. And then I think we blew Delaware out. And we unfortunately had the quarterfinal game. Losing to Cornell put us at a bad seed. And so we had to play Syracuse in the Dome in the quarterfinals my freshman year, and they were loaded. That was Rick Beardsley, his senior year, and Colsey, and Casey was a freshman. And there's some of those highlights floating around on Twitter right now. And they were definitely a better team, and they beat us up in the Dome. But then sophomore year, when Coach T put me at attack, and it was a cohesive unit, we started rolling pretty well. We beat Hopkins the first game. We lost to Virginia the second game, and then we started kind of rolling through the Ivy Leagues and putting up huge numbers. And then that's when we faced Virginia in that final game. It was a wet field. They were probably more talented, but we pulled that one off. And that's when we kind of, we all said, this is fun. Let's keep doing this.
Yeah. Well, it's also, congratulations. And now there's pressure to repeat, and then, repeat again. And Jesse, you mentioned that you put up some huge numbers in your days at Princeton. And lacrosse is a great, phenomenal, awesome, cohesive team sport. Is there any one or two individual records that you hold or held at Princeton that stood above the rest as something that you thought were pretty special?
Well, I think the scoring records that John, Chris, and I set, or some. I mean, Mikey Sowers has broken most of them. I think I saw the scoring.
We're getting there. We'll get to him.
Yeah, that was a lot of that was a function of going so deep in the playoffs and having more games than other teams. And it was at a time where the Ivy League was not that strong, and so we'd put up some big numbers in the first half of Ivy League games, and then we'd get pulled, and we put in the other guys, the second team. But playing with Chris and John, I'm going to get a lot of open looks, and hopefully if they push out on me and cover me, then it's going to open things up for John and Chris. But what a lot of people don't realize is I set the all-time goal record at Princeton, but guess who's number 2? Chris Massey.
Yeah.
He also broke the previous scoring career goal record, which was held by Justin Tortolani. So to have two guys in the same class both break the all-time goal record is pretty phenomenal. And then obviously John, being more of an assist guy, he set all sorts of point records himself.
Yep. And it's funny, you mentioned that the goal record I was looking up your stats and getting prepped and working through this. Close to a dozen games, Jesse. You had 5 or 6 goals in a game. Is that a big proponent of that great offense? And coach getting you good looks? Is Metzi in the conversation? There's one of the great offensive guys.
Oh yeah, Coach Metzbauer was great, and he was kind of the calming force for the whole team when Coach Tierney was kind of getting intense there. So they had a perfect yin and yang balance. And yeah, I mean, our offense was pretty hard to stop. I mean, you had John Hess, who was the ex-attackman, primarily, he's strong hands left. He's a left-hander, but he can go right, obviously. And then you had, to be honest, no one on the team knew if Chris Massey was righty or lefty. I mean, he could go both ways. He dodged both ways. He played on the other side, and then I was a right-handed, kind of more off-ball inside player, but I could also play the wing, and I could stretch the defense with some outside shooting.
Sure.
So it was a perfect balance of skill sets that we had. And then Coach Metzbauer would put together some nice plays that would, usually start with a midfielder creating some movement. So if we had a midfielder dodging and beating someone and creating some motion on defense, then we usually, would find someone open for a pretty easy look. So we tended to get easy looks, and when we didn't, we just gave the ball to Chris Massey and let him dodge.
Yeah, and it tend to work out pretty well. When you get alongside so many great players as you did in the MLL, what stands out as some great moments that you were able to be a part of in your days in Major League Lacrosse and some of the records you set?
The MLL was pretty cool in the beginning years because it kind of came out of nowhere. And I played 1 year of club lacrosse in 1999 for Capital down in DC after college, and I obviously knew that the MLL was on the radar. I worked at Warrior Lacrosse and was pretty close with David Morrow, and he and Jake were talking about this league, and so I thought it was a pretty neat idea to be able to continue to play outdoor lacrosse on some TV and with some higher profile than the club. And I did play a few years of indoor, but the excitement of the MLL Summer Showcase in 2000 was pretty special. It was no one really.
Was that the Americans against the Nationals? Were those the two?
Yeah, I mean, very creative names and probably some not so great uniforms looking back on it. But it was a scramble to pull that off. But as a player, it was cool. I mean, we knew it wasn't big time, and we were hoping that the league would just stick around and last, which it did. And now there's more professional lacrosse opportunities for players now. So it was exciting. I mean, you play club lacrosse in front of 20 people at some field somewhere, and it's the best players in the world, but getting that on some sort of television outlet and then having a few thousand fans just made it pretty cool.
Jesse Hubbard is our guest, the record holder at Princeton, record holder for a number of MLL teams. Jesse, let's look at today's game, the way it is. And I have the simple question written: Michael Sowers, your thoughts?
Wow.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, where do you begin with Michael Sowers? He's a one-of-a-kind talent, one-of-a-kind leader, and I think he just has an infectious work ethic that guys around him want to work hard and maintain his level of excellence. And it's just such a shame that he and the other seniors and everyone playing this spring had the season cut short, because Princeton was looking pretty strong and they definitely had some nice chemistry, and we'll see what happens next year. But yeah, he was I was up at Princeton his freshman year fall ball. I was on campus, and Zach Courier was a little banged up, so he wasn't practicing. And I remember Zach Courier telling me day one of Mikey Sowers' freshman year fall ball practice that he was the best player on their team.
Wow.
Coming from
Zach Courier too.
Yeah, and I saw, Sowers was going hard during one-on-ones and during scrimmage from X, going hard as you could possibly imagine. And yeah, his work ethic is truly phenomenal. And he loves the sport, loves the game. And I look forward to watching him for many more years to come.
Yeah, it's funny to loop it back in. I remember watching Michael Sowers when he played for Team Philadelphia in the Under Armour All-American underclass event. And he was as quick as a hiccup. He was able to make the big outside play. He could also finish a nifty little dodge on the inside. Looking back at some coaches you had in your life, obviously Coach Nostrand was your high school coach. Then you had the great Bill Tierney. Is there a coach that you never got to play for that you would have really relished the chance to do that?
That's a great question. Growing up, we loved Syracuse. My brother and I and all our friends, how could you not, the way they played in the late 80s. And when I really started learning about lacrosse was the 8 era, and Zilberti and Marichek, and they had the swagger. And Roy Simmons Jr. was just such a cool guy, so mellow. He let him play. He was, he's obviously an artist, so he let them create artwork on the field. So as a little kid, imitating their moves, I would have loved to have been part of one of Roy Simmons Jr.'s teams or huddles or whatever. And it's funny. We obviously going to Princeton. We played against them. His last game was the semifinals of our senior year, and it was kind of tough.
Really? I didn't know that was his last game. I know the outcome of the game. You guys won, but you sent out Roy Simmons with a loss?
What's
up, dude?
I was shocked that
he's Roy Simmons.
I know.
Although you were being coached by Bill Tierney too, and you want to talk about the greatest coaches ever, I think you got the Roy Simmons, Bill Tierney debate could go on forever and no one would ever know who won. So that's a phenomenal way to look back. It's great to have you on, Jesse. I appreciate your time. I also, like you, I think we got cheated. The Ivy League had Princeton, obviously unbelievable. Yale, unbelievable. Cornell, unbelievable. Brown had just beaten UVA at home. Harvard with Coach Jerry Byrne in his first year. Who am I leaving out?
Dartmouth looking good.
Dartmouth is still getting along. They're going to find a way to make some strides. But the Ivy League this year was jacked with talent and skill and competitive. We all got cheated a little bit in that one. So that's an unfortunate turn. Do you see Princeton making a run to championship weekend this year, maybe?
They were feeling it. They had chemistry. They played well against some big guys. It's a long season, and there were a lot of schools that were doing very well. But obviously, that was everyone's hope if they could keep it going. Get
it back there. All right, my man. Thank you for the time. And let's get some Motive Pure around for these people to keep them hydrated, huh?
Yes, for sure.
You got it, brother.
Hydrated. Thanks, Booker.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
All right, take care.
Outstanding high school lacrosse career. When the kid touches the ball, he scores goals.
Say hello to Matt Rambo.
Look at the spin move. As Rambo steps in, sticks it.
Awesome. That was a good time.
Matt Rambo is just taking over.
Having a historic year for the University of Maryland. Matt Rambo.
Welcome, and hey now, we got a great episode today, the Booker Corrigan Show. Thanks for joining us. I got Dave Kotowski, a great Brown lacrosse person, but also somebody who is very, very much in tune with the recruiting concept. Dave, thanks for taking the time away, and I hope you're staying safe and staying solo.
Yeah, well, Booker, thanks for having me on. We are definitely doing that. We're quarantining hard here. In my case, I have to because I have a daughter who is battling Lyme disease,
Oh.
and she's got an immune system that is kind of pretty fragile. So we're taking all precautions. It's like I go and spray our mailbox every day from the mail. So
That is, yeah.
we
I
got
can
to
imagine you're doing many other things too. Getting into it, and I respect your level of knowledge with the recruitment process. Let's go back prior to COVID-19. What changes had you noticed in the recruiting landscape and the recruiting challenges or obstacles that exist for kids and coaches?
Well, obviously, I think the biggest thing that, is, especially for this class of 21s right now, who are all juniors, this was the first class that was hit by the new recruiting rules, with kind of slowing down the recruiting calendar, which I loved it. I was actually all for it from the beginning. I couldn't believe it. And even in my case, as much as I would talk to parents and kids in our program and my high school kids that I coach about, taking their time in the process, I really felt people were still rushing. And,
I agree with you 1,000,000% on that,
Yeah.
because you had kids who were in ninth grade saying, I'm going to Duke, which if you could get a ninth grade kid to say, I'm going to live my high school years like I'm going to go to Duke, good for you. But that doesn't mean you have to go. Like the commitments, you're exactly right. Keep going on that.
Yeah. So, forgetting even just Duke, I mean, we had an eighth grader who was committing to Yale.
Yeah. Wow.
An eighth grader. And, it reminded me of a funny story. I had a kid one time who I coached, a lacrosse player. And he went to Chaminade. I went to Chaminade. And he was a goalie. And his dad and I grew up playing against each other. Gene Isnardi, he's currently a college coach. And I had his son. And, there's sometimes you can just see it in a kid. That they're going to be a great player. And I introduced him to Lars Tiffany up at Hofstra, because Lars was recruiting at the time. And I said, Lars, this kid's going to be an absolute gem, and you should take a look at him. And he's like, what grade are you in? And he's like, 6th. and Lars goes, you know what? How great would it be from a PR thing if I committed this kid in 6th grade, to Brown at the time? He ended up going to West Point and playing goalie at West Point, but it was kind of funny. But that's the process that we were talking about.
It's crazy to think of that now, and you addressed the COVID-19 a little bit. Tell me some other experiences that you have as far as the landscape of recruiting and how things might be a little bit differently in other sports. I know you talked with Anson Dorrance today, the great soccer coach from UNC. What'd you learn from him?
Well, listen, Anson Dorrance for me, that was actually a dream interview. When I first got into coaching, one of the first books I had was Anson Dorrance's book,
The Man Watch.
The one thing I love about it, in his book, he always talks about making everything competitive. Kids love that. They love that competitive side of it. And also holding kids accountable. We talked a little bit about parents. When I've had a bunch of the coaches, I had Jenny Levy, I had Ricky Freed, I had Devin Wills on yesterday. And we talk about it, and Anson, without me even having to bring it up, he talked about some of the parent issues of, the helicopter parent into the snowplow parent into now we call it the banker parent who's trying to buy their way into universities. And so, there's so much to be learned from someone like Anson Dorrance. I encourage everyone to go get his book, because literally there's no other coach out there who has a track record. He has 1,000 wins in soccer, 21 national championships. I mean, if you can't learn from Anson Dorrance, there's something wrong with you. But, even in his case, the types of kids that he's looking for, and how does he get kids to a Carolina versus, he said, they played Stanford this year, national championship. He said a lot of those kids at Stanford were kids that turned him down.
Yeah.
And, playing against them. But, this whole thing is, it's a tough year. It's a tough year for 21s who haven't been recruited yet, or were in the middle of the process. It's really hard on them. A lot of these kids are looking at it right now and saying, is the summer tournaments going to happen? I'm the optimist. Yeah. I think they're going to happen. I'm hoping that they're going to happen. And the one thing I've been saying all along with this is that I wish more people would hit the pause button than hit the delete button. And even me as a high school coach, I love what our athletic director is doing right now, because he's encouraging everyone. He's like, even if we can get 4 games in for these seniors, the 2020 class, like, let's have some type of season for them to finish up with. So it's hard. The recruiting process is going to be different. It's going to be unique. I think it's also going to affect some of the 22s who are 10th graders. And it may affect some of the 20s as well, because now you're adding kids with a 5th year with the NCAA.
Right. Oh, God, yeah. That's a huge another conversation that we'll have to have. But a lot of the recruiting, and you know this with Team Elevate Lax, which I know is a phenomenal group that does a great job. But a lot of those showcase events, the Under Armour All-American Underclass Tryouts, the IWLCA showcase events, they're all a great way for kids to get recruited. But what's the value in team sports of playing with your high school team and letting a coach see you in that role, in your opinion?
Well, listen, I personally think it's one of the best ways. I really do. And I don't think – you know what the problem is? I think there's been so much emphasis on club. And I'm a club director. Mm-hmm. I own my own club. And there's been so much emphasis on club that I think people tend to lose the importance of playing with kids for a county championship, a state championship, and how that impacts you going forward. Now, especially, on Long Island, most of the best programs on Long Island are the public schools. Then you have, obviously, on the boys' side, you have Chaminade and St. Anthony's, 2 of the best, programs in the country. On the girls' side, we're competing against, St. Anthony's and Sacred Heart and top programs like that. But even with that, a lot of the kids that are going to St. Anthony's, they'll come from a bunch of kids from the same town. So if, like, you have a bunch of Huntington kids, for example, or a bunch of Garden City kids on that same team, there's that camaraderie of playing for a championship. And I think, the best coaches out there, they still are. They're going to the county championships. They're going to the playoffs. That's why on Long Island, when they're holding those championships at Hofstra University, the top levels are filled with college coaches. Yep. Because they want to see them in that atmosphere.
And the other thing that I love about seeing a high school team play in a high school showcase where they're high school kids, they've practiced together way more than they've actually played games together. Oh, yeah. Like, in high school lacrosse, you play 2 games a week. You practice 4 days a week. And you also have 2.5 weeks of practice before you even play 1 game. College coaches recognize, let's see what they've practiced, not just what they do when they're out there by themselves, like in a showcase event. So that's a huge value.
Well, next week I have John Donowski's coming on the program, and, and one of the questions I want to ask him is, when I was playing back in Brown with Tommy Dwyer and Lars Tiffany and all those guys, one of the best things is we were playing 2 games a week. We were playing Wednesday, Saturday, religiously Wednesday, Saturday, and now they spread out the season so much. You got these early February games, and on Monday we had Devin Wills, head coach at Harvard, on, and she was talking about the World Cup. She said we played 8 games in 10 days.
That's playing.
If you could play at the highest level, right? And most of these kids are playing in tournaments where you're playing 3 or 4 games a day.
Yep.
Why aren't we playing more midweek games? I don't know. It's just another topic for lacrosse.
Well, I've asked the same question to other coaches, and they say sometimes it's about the academic requirements. Like, kids can't miss that Wednesday class so many times. And no college team is going to do what a high school team does in showing up late because you hit traffic and, you had to get those kids that last period class. Talk with Anson Dorrance and all these coaches that you have this link to. Team sports, how is being a part of team sports helped your daughter reach from level to level to level and to continue to assimilate into groups that way and become a nice, responsible young adult?
Well, I'll tell you one of the things I talk to all of my kids about, and this is everyone that I talk about recruiting. One of the benefits that doesn't get talked about enough of being a team sport and going into college to play a team sport. And I don't care if you're playing club. So even if you're going and playing club lacrosse, WCLA, MCLA, club lacrosse, still playing at a high level, not just Division I, II, and III in junior college, anything in the club. As soon as you step on that campus, day one, you have a connection.
Yep.
A connection to that team day one. Now, I know for me at Brown, I wanted to play two sports in college, for forever. That was my thing. I wanted to play two sports. I wanted to play football. I wanted to play lacrosse. But even for me, I know how homesick I was freshman year at Brown.
Yeah.
And, thank God my mom made me stick it out, but I was. But
yeah.
The thing for me that kept me there was my team. That connection to the team, that you have this other family. And so that's a big part of it. But it's the other side of it are the life lessons that these kids are learning on the field every day. And I was an executive at Merrill Lynch back in the day, and I used to hire athletes. I would hire athletes, and most of the athletes I hired were all successful. And I was forced to hire one guy who my boss basically kind of jammed on me. And he came from a very well-known company, big executive, but he failed. And then I asked him at one point, like, you ever play any team sports? He's like, no, I was never really a team sport guy. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
just interesting. But
It
look
certainly
at
is.
coachability, the ability to take instruction, not just on the field, in the classroom,
Yep.
the boardroom, grit. Anson Dorrance talked about grit.
Yep.
The self-starter, who's willing to put in that extra time, learn more. I tell kids that, I'm learning every day. I'm trying to find new vehicles. I try to listen to a really good podcast every single morning on my walk because I want to learn. This morning I listened to Brendan Bouchard, who's awesome. He wrote the book Atomic Habits. It's just great stuff. You never stop learning. But these are the things you learn from team sports. That's what it's all about.
And those lessons that can be carried over, there's so many of them. And it's great to hear it from another voice. I know I tell my kids all the time, I need you to do two things your whole life. One, prove that you know the difference between right and wrong. And you have to do it almost on a daily basis. And two, have a love of learning. Be coachable, be teachable, all those things. And I'd listen to you and Anson Dorrance talk about how confidence is important, the love of the ball, the love of the game, the love of the work that it takes to become great, and what makes the great great. What'd you learn from Jenny Levy, and what has she helped you with in your relationship with North Carolina head women's coach Jenny Levy?
Well, listen, Jenny is a gem. She's literally a gem. And I talk about that all the time as someone who's trying to help kids get to the next level and get recruited. And, we've had a bunch of kids go on to play at Carolina, and I've had kids go, last year, 7 out of the 8 Elite 8 teams, we had Elevate kids on those teams. And, but the thing is, there are coaches out there who I won't send kids to. Because of either how they treat kids or, reputation of the program and things like that, where Jenny is at just a different level. And I told Anson, the best compliment that, you could probably give is when Jenny asked my daughter why she wanted to come to Carolina, she said, because you're going to make me a better woman. And that's what Jenny does. But Jenny does a lot of other things that I think really don't get hyped enough. Here's one thing that she does. She lets kids make mistakes on the field. She doesn't punish them. Kids make mistakes. She's a coach who gives more second chances than any other coach I've seen. And that's amazing, is letting kids in a big stage make mistakes. One of the things she does too, she plays a lot of players. She plays a lot of kids. She's constantly running new kids onto the field constantly. I love that. But it's the other side of it that she truly has made Carolina lacrosse a family. And this past fall, they had a huge event at Carolina for the 25th anniversary of Carolina lacrosse. And we literally were sitting on one of the last tables in the back and just listening to the one person after another get up and talk about what Carolina lacrosse has meant to them and what Jenny has meant to them because she started the program. That is, in a nutshell, what Jenny has done. And it's just been fantastic. And to call her a friend and it's just great for me.
It is. Slinger. We love her. You had Tommy Marichek on your program, and piggybacking on the Jenny Levy success at Carolina, how do you believe Tommy Marichek is going to help get IMG to national prominence down there in beautiful Florida?
Well, the interesting thing is, prior to them even having lacrosse at IMG, George Pine was the president of IMG at the time, and George played football at Brown, and George and I had been constantly picking George's brain, constantly talking about lacrosse. George's family is a big football family, the Pine family. His brother, Jim Pine, was a center for Virginia Tech. He ended up, I think he was a 7-time all-Pro bowler. George's dad played in the NFL. George's grandfather played in the NFL.
That's some DNA right there.
George's one nephew is going to probably be the starting quarterback at Notre Dame, maybe. So, just a huge football. But he's like, but listen, lacrosse is exploding. And I want you to go down to IMG. I want you to spend a few days down there and tell me, do you think we could add IMG lacrosse? And can we do it? And after meeting all the people there and what IMG is all about, and they really are about developing the entire student athlete. Our motto at Elevate is elevate your mind, elevate your body, elevate your game, and you'll elevate your life. They're very similar in what they're doing. It's the total package. And when I was able to sit and literally meet with the basketball coach, the soccer coach, the head of sports psychology, and all these different people, watching Nick Bollettieri, who founded it, started as a tennis academy, watching him train 2 players, the number 1 U15 player in the country from the United States and the number 1 U17 player from Japan, and watching them side by side train with him, I was like, you could add lacrosse here.
Yeah.
But now I think what they were missing was that person that Tommy brings to the table. And what does Tommy bring to the table? 4-time All-American, U.S. Lacrosse Hall of Fame, Philadelphia Wings retired number. But what he brings is a level of credibility. And I think what he's going to be able to do is not only bring in great kids that either want to go there as for a number of years, or bring in that kid who wants to do a PG year, but he also has the credibility with the lacrosse community from who's going to get recruited out of IMG. This year there's 4 kids on the Syracuse team, including their starting goalie, who all came out of IMG.
That's certainly a nice little link for them. One of the things that I also want you to reiterate from the conversation you had with Anson Dorrance was the 3 kinds of players that exist on a team: the one that wants to be left alone, the one that wants to be coached, and then the other one that wants to be told the truth. How do you help a kid understand? How do you help a kid realize which one they are, or just elevate their game, as you said, to be the one who wants to be told the truth? Are there some hard conversations that exist there?
I have a funny story about that because when I first started coaching high school lacrosse, and I'm not going to mention in town, but I was coaching at a really good high school, and I used to say to people, I used to say to parents, they would come to me, they want to talk about their kids, and I would say, well, do you want the XYZ answer, or do you want the East Meadow answer? So I grew up in East Meadow, blue collar town,
Right.
blue collar kids. And they said, well, what's the difference? I said, well, the other answer is going to be sugary smooth. You're going to feel really good about yourself. The East Meadow answer is going to be the truth. And you may not like it. And they're like, well, I guess I want the truth. I'm like, you probably don't. I'm just
Might
being
not
honest.
like it. Yeah, the 5-1-6ers.
So I think that's one of the things. And I think my kids, and I have such a great relationship with so many of my kids. And even as a club coach, my relationship doesn't end when they get recruited. I'm still talking to these kids on a weekly basis while they're in college. They're calling me for advice. And, the one thing I won't ever do with them is I won't BS them. I won't, because it's not going to help them. And I had a kid recently, last year who called me, and she called me about playing time. And I said, I totally understand, why you call me about playing time. I said, but let's talk about all the aspects of why you might not be getting playing time. But I said, the one thing you need to do is you need to be able to go to your coach and be able to say, how can I earn more playing time? What do I need to do?
Mm-hmm.
And that's an important part. And it can't be
Tell
mommy
me the
daddy.
truth. Yeah.
It can't be mommy and daddy, and it's got to be. But unfortunately, the world we live in, Not everyone wants to see themselves as, listen, Anson just talked about it. This is the story that he told. He told a story about one year they had a girl who started for them in her junior year, and they didn't win a national championship. The next year, she was a role player. She came off the bench. They won the national championship. And the next day, her dad was in his office saying, how come my daughter wasn't starting all year?
Yeah.
And so the truth, it's only going to help us. And, so for me personally as a coach, I think I've evolved so much as a coach. And one of the biggest things for me was going through the Positive Coaching Alliance. And for me, it was one of my club lacrosse teammates, Reed Jackson, All-American, Team USA player. Reed led that first class on positive coaching. And I literally said, oh my God, I'm that guy who they're talking about. They're talking to me.
I could say I was, I don't know if I was that guy, but because I don't want to be too hard on myself. But yes, it's amazing when you think you know everything, how little you really know. And as soon as you admit, I don't know much, you start to learn, wow. And coaching is exactly that way.
Yeah. So, and telling the players, knowing that it's okay to fail. There's a great book that someone got me. And I use it as a joke with all my kids all the time. I say, come on, remember the saying, sometimes you win, sometimes you, and they'll say lose. I said, no, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn.
Yeah.
And so, if we can learn from our mistakes, if we can, create grit, but being honest with the players and telling them, if I'm not honest with someone and I blow smoke at them and tell them, oh, you can play anywhere, what's going to happen when they go down the recruiting process and all those top coaches aren't looking at them? I'm a big proponent.
They lose their drive.
I'm a big proponent of Division III. I love Division III. My nephew is a great example. My nephew had an opportunity to play, had a scholarship offer from Furman, and then he had an offer to play for Pete Lasagna at Bates. And I said to him,
I love Pete Lasagna.
It's not even close.
Yeah.
You go to Bates. Bates has it's harder to get into Bates. And that's why you use it in lacrosse. You're using it to get into a school you might not have gotten into.
Yep.
He goes to Bates, played a lot as a freshman, and he might not have gotten that at Furman. And he's loving his experience right now at Bates. And the other thing, too, is I've had so many kids go. The captain at Trinity this year is one of my kids. The other experience of being a true student is they all go do a year abroad, most of them. You can't do that in Division I. It's almost impossible to do. So, I love also pushing kids towards, listen, I have kids that are playing at the top schools in the country, but I also have kids competing for a national championship at a Division III level.
Yeah, we love to hear that. So many great stories, Dave. We're going to have to get you back on at some point this spring, especially. Praise God it doesn't go too long, but we need to stay sequestered and quarantined as long as it takes. Thank you for your time and your expertise.
Being a leader, Booker. We need more positivity. We need more positivity. You're doing a great job of bringing that. And
thank you.
We need the leaders out there to keep stepping up.
Yep, and that's what we're hopefully going to get. I totally appreciate your time.
Thanks,
and I respect the work you're doing. Team Elevate Lacrosse. I'm a fan, man.
See you soon.
All right, you got it. Thank you.
What has four legs and is always ready to run the Baltimore 10 Miler? The June 6th Baltimore 10 Miler will once again be live on WMAR2 News. It always has the best post-race party of the summer, featuring a Jimmy Buffett cover band and Under Armour Premium. And new this year, the two-person relay. Start and finish at the Maryland Zoo in Baltimore, and wait until you see the elephant-themed finishers medals. Go to baltimore10miler.com and register now.